We oft forget in this globalized world of ours that Western fashion was not always the norm. The clothing of the past was just as diverse as the world itself. When we push past the images of corsets and crinolines, we are exposed to a beautiful array of design and textile that explains another story of the past. Handmaking 16th century clothing is no easy task. It is especially harder in the absence of detailed research and instruction on how to do so. Yet here I am, trying not only to recreate but also to understand how women's lives were reflected in their clothing. Like many other places, 16th century Turkey was an incredibly diverse society. What women wore was dictated by their class and their social status, their ethnicity, religion, and even whether they lived nomadic or sedentary lifestyles. In this painting from the late 16th century, we see a Turkish harem, the part of the upper class household that was reserved for women. The clothing that they wear is thus what we would call homewear, as in public this would be covered by an outer kaftan to preserve their modesty. Although there are several components to their outfits, I will focus on the entari, the outer dress, and the kaftan, mostly an item worn over the entari. I began my quest at the State Library, where I found a few books that outlined the general pattern of 16th and 17th century kaftans. They appear to be cut in 2 or more pieces, generally with large side gores to widen the item. Cloth was woven on narrower looms in the 15th and 16th centuries. Dressmakers had to use several cut pieces to create width and body. Kaftans and entaris were mainly cut in a rectangular shape, with darts and gores added later. In Janet Arnold's pattern of a 16th century kaftan located at the Topkapı Palace, we see just how rectangular both the bodice pieces and even the arm's eyes were. Similarly, in these patterns by Nurhan Atasoy, a prominent Turkish art historian, we see the exact same boxiness. The outer kaftan is made up of 2 front pieces, 1 back piece, and 4 gores. In hindsight, I probably could have made the gores much wider, but this is my first time making such a kaftan, so I am excused. Although the entari is technically a separate piece, it was often cut in the same rectangular T-form as the kaftan. So I will be using the same pattern I used for the outer kaftan, although I will be lengthening both the hem and the sleeves. Kaftan sleeves could vary in length, width and shape. When laid out, extant kaftan sleeves have this slightly curved shape. So I initially cut the sleeve as 2 separate pieces, but then decided to cut on the fold because I am lazy. However, it is technically historically accurate because the Ottomans avoided cutting into their expensive fabrics whenever they could. I've just put on the front piece and I've pinned the arm to this side. In a lot of the extant garments, long sleeves are attached at about what we would call today like the t-shirt length. So as you can see here, you've got the t-shirt length and then you've got the long sleeve attached. And the reason why they did this a lot of the times was because you could detach the sleeves. My entire sleeves aren't going to be detachable, but maybe in the future I will make one like that. Felt and wool were commonly used for linings, particularly in clothing for the cooler seasons. This red felt will be used for the inner lining, and for the outer part of the garment I chose this fabric. I honestly don't even know what it is. It does have quite a stretch to it, so maybe some kind of polyester blend. It may not be historically accurate, but the floral motifs, especially the tulip, is reminiscent of Ottoman era textiles. Since I wanted to use as many historical techniques as possible, I'm sewing with a back stitch, a stronger stitch that can reinforce places like the shoulders and the arm's eye that are prone to wear and tear. I probably should have sewn every individual piece. For example, this front piece, I probably should have sewn it to the, where is it? Front piece over here first. And then attach them kind of piece by piece. But instead what I did is I sewed this whole thing together, all the pieces, the back, the front. This is still pinned together, but now I have to sew this whole thing and then attach it to this. So the only thing I really need to decide on is how I want to sew these raw edges. I'm thinking I could just do like a rolled seam. So roll it inside and then you won't be able to see the raw edges. Purely from an aesthetic point of view, I think it would look nicer if I just rolled this part over. Would add another element to the outfit. So I think I will make a zebra, what we call a zebra stitch in Turkish. It's called a zürafa iğne oyası. That was common at that time to finish gowns and entities with the oya, the embroidery. Zoom out, and then also along this bottom section over here. I chose to use a cotton thread. In hindsight, probably should have used a silk blend because that would have been easier to push through this felt. This embroidery on the edge of the garment is done by inserting the needle and wrapping the string twice around the needle. Before the invention of serges and overlock machines, people had to find very different ways to finish off their edges of the garments and to stop them from fraying. I've pinned it all together and I know it looks like a bit of a mess. When I sew it, it's going to make much more sense. These are the gauze. Obviously they have to be ironed out. So because the gauze aren't really holding up any weight, or they don't need to be very structurally sound, they're mainly there just to widen the garment and give some flow. I'm going to do a very quick stitch. So I'm going to fold over the raw edge and just give it a tiny stitch, making sure that the stitches are very small because in the extant garments they are hardly visible. I mean, they're tiny. Probably would be quicker just to do a running stitch all along, but I don't want to leave these raw edges because this fabric is fraying like crazy. Front closures were very common on 16th century kaftans. Not only were they functional, but they were also a form of decoration. All that effort for this tiny little thing. This is just going to end up getting tied around. Wait a sec. So I figured it out. This is going to be the button. So these little buttons are going to be placed along the chest. I'll probably make about 3 of them going down. Modern representations of this period have been so focused on the royal minority that the processes and styles of dressmaking for ordinary women have been overshadowed by tacky, medieval fantasy-inspired representations. Although these succeed in the drama department, they definitely do not give us a realistic image of the past, which is something we should strive towards.